Coming to you live from the shadow of the big house, it's IT4U. Tips and tricks on ITS tools, products, services, and more with your host, Jean Mackey. Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to IT4U. I'm your host, Jean Mackey. So these are live webinars brought to you by Information and Technology Services. And if you're having any audio or video problems during the live webinar, tell us in the chat pod. And if it's not on our end, we will hopefully have some tips. If you're watching the YouTube closed caption version of this, look in the description field. There'll be a Google Doc with live links. And for those of you who are here now, I will send you that doc when I send out the recording. If you do need an accommodation to participate, just let us know. What's coming up? Well, Jen Ruck, our co-worker, is going to do a cool thing about Google Calendars. It may have more power than you're aware of. So there's the link. And then I'm going to do something in December on formulas and variables in business objects, because that's actually one of the more powerful aspects of business objects, what you can do with formulas and variables. But wait, there's more. We've got a business objects open house coming up in December, and you don't have to register. You can just show up. But there's a link right there for a Google Plus community event, and that's going to be 9 to noon in Wolverine Tower. And yeah, we've got people from both ITS and central offices for who are experts with both business objects as the tool and the data: payroll, student development, financials, HR. And some of you are already members of the new Google group, the UN Business Objects Users Forum. So that's a link to join if you haven't already. And there's some good conversations. And even if you're in the health system and you don't have access to Gmail, you can still have access to the Google group. Today, merging multiple data providers in business objects, and actually we're just going to go right to the demo. So let me do that. Share my screen. Here we go. And I'm going to go to business object. Well, first I'm going to go to we redid all of our business objects resources with the upgrades, so that's right here in my link, and I'll send you the direct link to this. But I have both an overview document and a step-by-step, so we're just going to take a quick look at the overview. What's it mean to merge data from multiple queries? And why would you do it? So, for example, there's information in FN01 that you won't find in FN06 if you're working with financials. In the example we're going to look at, there's information on students in recruiting admissions, and then there's different information in student records, and then there's some overlap. So if you want to display the information in both of those data sets in one report, this is a way to do that. There might be a way that you are working in a single data set, but you want to display information in, multiple fields in a single row. Working with standalone folders, you have to create, you have to merge them, you have to connect them, otherwise you get the mysterious Cartesian error. Cartesian product error. That's a useful message, isn't it? Okay, so what we're going to see in our example is that you have to have, if you have multiple queries and you're going to connect them, you have to have at least one object in common, like dept ID, EMPL ID, and those objects have to have common values and common data type. So if you create your own local variables, those can't be merged. It has to be something that comes out of the data set. You can use measure objects. Have you noticed the little orangey things? We're going to take a look at those in the next to an object in a data set. It's a teeny tiny little ruler, and it just means that it's a calculation. So you can use those. You don't have to connect those in any way when you have multiple queries, but they might do their calculations a little different, so you have to pay attention to that. And then we're going to see how to, when you have an object in one query and you have another object in the second query, how do you display everything? Well, there's a process of creating detail objects. So we're going to take a look at that. So anyway, I would encourage you to go into my link, look at this document, and then it also links to the step-by-step. So without further ado, let's go into business objects, and let's actually look at an example. So this is working with the recruiting and admissions data set and student records. So I'll start by double-clicking, and as you know, when I double-click, it opens it up in reading mode. You can't do a whole lot in reading mode. You have to be in design mode to do much of anything. So first of all, so I've got my, this particular report is about, I'm looking at students in recruiting and admissions, which is called SAO2, who I want to know the EMPL IDs of students who applied and were matriculated, meaning enrolled, in a particular career during a particular term, and the date when that action became effective. And of those who were enrolled, I want to know which ones went on to attend classes and how many credits they have, and that I'm going to find in student records. So let's go to the query panel. And it's annoying, isn't it, that the query panel doesn't open in a bigger window, and I have talked to the Business Objects team about that, and there's nothing we can do about it right now. Okay, so see down here I've renamed them just to make it useful, but this is query 1 and this is query 2. So query 1 is in SAO2, you see over here, recruiting and admissions. And again, you know, a nice thing about business objects is that if I'm working with a query somebody already created, if I click it, if I click an object in results, it opens the folder that it came from. So here's what we've got in our first query. We've got EMPL ID, academic program and description, academic plan, the admission application number, and the program effective date, what was the program action, program status, and what was the admit term. So down here I've got a particular, I'm going to do this for a particular academic career, particular admit term, and program status. I don't want people who were canceled, where the status was canceled. Okay, so if I want to add a query, I go up here and I add a query from the universe, and then I would select a universe, and then I would create my result objects and my filters for the second query. But it's kind of like Julia Child, like I've already baked the cake, right? So I go to SAO3. I've used that joke before, sorry. And what have I got here? So SAO3 is student records, so it's after people are, these are students who are already active and enrolled. So I'm looking for their registration status, and what was the term they registered, and how many credits do they have now. And academic career, when I'm creating multiple queries, if I use the exact same verbiage in my prompt, enter values for acad career, and you see over here enter values for acad career, so that's going to give me one prompt that's filtering both queries. And then the term is going to be the registration term. So that's the basics. Really all you have to know is there has to be at least one object that's common to both queries, because that's how I'm going to connect them. In this case it's EMPL ID. I've got some others too, so you know, I've got acad career, academic career. And term means different things. Over here in SAO2 the term is when were they admitted, and over here it's going to be the term they were registered. Alright, so I'm going to get out of that. And so when I ran the query, and you know, obviously that's confidential data, so I've masked the EMPL ID and the admission application number. But this is the SAO2. So I've got the application program effective date, academic program. I ran it for social work, for the MSW program, which I have a fondness for because I happen to have an MSW, like you care. But anyway, academic plan description. What was the program action, the program status, and the admit term? And here's my SAO3. And it's just what's the registration status, what's the term they were registered, and how many units have they taken. All right, so now let's see, how do we connect them? What's that?
Somebody, Sandra said it. He or she's getting a choppy feed. But I got it.
Okay. I'm going to go over here and look at available objects. Now, by default, it lists them by alphabetical order, and I would recommend you go down here and list them by query. All right, so that shows me an SAO2, an SAO3. Now, when I'm thinking about how this works is when I create my report, and there's a little troubleshooting going on for people who are getting a choppy feed. When I create the report that's going to draw from both queries, I'm going to look at my queries here and which one has more objects. In this case, it's SAO2. So I can use everything. Well, first of all, I have to remember we were going to connect them on EMPL ID. So I've already done that. So the way I did that is I clicked EMPL ID in the first query and then controlled it and then did a right click and then select merge. And if I wanted to add more, I would if I created another query and I wanted to add that EMPL ID, I would select the merge one and then I would select the additional ones, and I could do a right click and add to the merge. And there's a whole step-by-step on that also. So I've already merged EMPL ID from SAO2 and SAO3. I can use the merge dimension object, and I can use everything from the first query I select. I can use in SAO3, I can use sum of unit taken. Why? Because remember we talked about the little orange ruler. It's a measure object, sum of unit taken. So I can use that, but I can't use, you'll see if I select here something in query, in the first query, these are grayed out. Registration, status, desk or short, and term desk or short. If I want to use those in my query that draws from both, I'm going to have to create detail objects, which is a way of just telling business objects, here's how these are connected. So I'm going to go to variables, and I'm doing a right click and new. There's other ways to get to this, but that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and I'm going to call it reg status detail. So qualifications. So when something is this little blue dimension cube, it can be character, numeric, or date, right? We talked about measure objects. Those are calculations, and they're dynamic, so they calculate based on what else is in the report. So if I'm counting number of EMPL IDs and I've put a filter on so I only get the ones that were registered last year, then it's going to give me that number. If I take the filter off and now I have more EMPL IDs, it's going to adjust its calculations, again, based on what else is going on in the report. The detail object, the thing that we care about with a detail object is that it always has an associated dimension object. And so that's how we're going to tell business objects this object is connected to the merge dimension object, in this case EMPL ID. Right? So now I've made it a detail object. I've associated it with the merge dimension object, and now I just have to put in the formula. The formula is just reg status desk or short. Will I please, why did I choose Empl ID? Because Empl ID is the only object that's common to both queries.
And Courtney asked, will you please provide definitions for dimension, measure, and details?
Yeah, I think it's in the document I was just looking at, so hold on just a sec. Let me go in there. Where was I here? Is that in here? Measure objects. Alright, I was thinking, here's a definition of measure and detail. A dimension object is just its character, numeric, or date, basically. It's not a calculation. That's about all I can say about it, but I'll follow up. I'll give you a little more verbiage on that. Okay. Now, where am I? Let me go back to my report here. Again, the main thing about a detail object is that it always has an associated dimension. So I'm creating a detail object so I can use it in the report that will have objects from both queries. So now I have a variable here, reg status detail, and I'm going to create another one for term desk or short for the registration term. Detail, select a merge dimension. Why am I picking Empl ID? Because that's what's common to both queries, so that's how I'm connecting. And I need to make this a little bigger, and we're looking for term. Alright, so I've given it a name, the qualification, it's a detail object, I've associated it, and I've given it a formula. And you know, when I do the thing on, when I do the IT4U on variables and formulas, we'll talk about the difference. But basically, a variable is a formula that you've given a name and a qualification. And what's nice about it is you can easily use it in multiple reports, you can move it around, you can filter on it, you can put a break or a section on it. You can't do those things with formulas.
I do have a question, Gene. If you have multiple merged, how would you know which to select?
Okay, so when I'm creating the detail object, some of what you're trying to figure out is ideally, you want to have more values for your dimension object than you do for your detail object. Because if you have more values, like if I have more values for term than I do for Empl ID, I might get a multi-value error in my report. So that's probably my main criteria. There are ways to get around that, but we're not going to get into that today. Yep, so that's my main criteria. So for this report, I've already got Empl ID. I've got, I've pulled everything that I could pull out of the, I pulled everything from SAO2, and then I included my measure object, sum of unit taken. So now I can take the registration detail object and put that over here. Great. And then I can get my registration term. So again, so now I've got everything that I wanted to have from the SAO2 query and everything I wanted from the SAO3 query. So that's the basics. So I have to have at least one. Again, if I'm going to just save this. If I go back to the query panel, I have to have at least one object in common for the queries. And you know, when you look at, I would encourage you, I don't know why it's hanging like that, but it is. There we go. I would encourage you to go into the maintained reports and you know, copy one that you use a lot that you know is a good report, copy it to your favorites, and go into the query panel and take a look at it, because a lot of those you're going to find that they have multiple queries, and you can take a look and say, you know, what's common, and in some cases you may have like 5 or 6 merge dimensions, you may have 30 variables that they created. So you can just start to get an idea of how they do that. So, you know, once I've got this, I could do my usual. I could set this as a section, the admit term. Like I thought I just did, but there we go. Let's see, have I got, I've got ACID plan. Oh, I want ACID program in there too. Let's see if it'll let me do that. Yeah, things are kind of slow. And ACID prog desker. You know, and I can set that as a section also. And I could, you know, take a look at the status, like is everybody registered? I can put a count on this. So, what kind of questions do you have at this point? Some pitfalls when merging. That's a good question, Michelle. Would the steps be much the same if
The secondary data provider is an Excel spreadsheet?
Sherry, it's not going to be the same, because if the other, first of all, if you're using Excel as a data provider, you have to go back and change your preferences so that you're using Java, because you can't use Excel when you're just in HTML mode. And when you're using Excel as a data provider, as we've talked about, and that's again a little out of scope for what we're doing right now, you can't create filters. You can't create query filters. You would want to filter your data provider before you brought it in. And then you can do some things like, there's a function in BusObj, it's called query on query, where you can create a query filter on the results of another query. So you can do that, but so no, the steps aren't the same. Similar idea. Yeah, we should do a whole demo on that. What are some of the pitfalls? I guess the pitfalls are just the multi-value error, the pound multi-value error, if you've got, if I've got more values in my variable than the merge dimension object. And then, what do I do with that? Well, one thing I can do is I can click on the edge of the table and format the table and turn off avoid duplicate row aggregation. Sometimes that gets rid of your pound multi-value error. I guess just knowing your data. So, speaking of knowing your data, I just wanted to point out that it's a good idea, and I'll send you this link, is to go to the ITS website, maze.umich.edu, and under reporting, go to data sets, right here, and it's got a list of all the data sets. And for example, we're looking at student data, and student records data dictionary. And what's great about that is it shows you, it's a little slow because it's a very large PDF file. It shows you the structure of how things work. So, just like when we create our multiple queries, they have to be connected somehow. That's true in the data warehouse. So it shows you there's a table in student records data called personal data, and it's connected with ethnicity. How is it connected? It's connected by EMPL ID. So it's a good idea to know your data, and then don't get dizzy, but I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom here. And it tells you, so if I'm looking at, let's see, what was I looking at? Program action. And I saw a value in program action that didn't make sense to me. It was like WAPP, application withdrawn. It shows me that. Shows me what that code is all about. Program action description. So I guess some of the pitfalls of creating queries and connecting them is that you have to know your data. And let me just put in a little plug. So that's why I'm really hoping that I'll see some of you when we do our Business Objects Open House, and that you will bring some of your questions. Let me get in here. But that's about what I got.
Typing. Let's see if she has a question. Besides the data dictionaries, what is the best way to learn more about different data sets?
The best way to learn more about different data sets is, well, there's two options. One is to go into MyLink and go into the catalog under reporting and look at our e-learning courses. There's one for each data set on using business objects with that data set. And the other really would be to start with some of the maintained reports that you use, and take a look at them. And again, if you go back to the query panel, and every folder here is described in the data dictionaries, so that's part of what you can draw on. And look at the multiple queries, look at what folder they come from. One of the things you want to pay attention to is, how do you add an object? How do you modify existing queries. Well, some of it is you want to work in the same folder as much as possible. So if I'm going to add something to this, I'm going to... Courtney, did you hear what I said about the open house? That would be the place to go. And also, I know you're a member of the Business Objects Forum on a continual basis. So the two options with data experts are to use the forum, because there are data experts in the forum, and to create an incident with the service center, because the service center staff are trained for a lot of the basic stuff, but then they can bump it up to data experts. So those are your options. Hope that's helpful. So Business Objects generates a programming code called structured query language. So if I click this little button right here, that's going to show me the code that's being generated. So sometimes I find it useful to look at that. So it's coming from like this is showing me the folder. And it's admissions, applications program, admin Apple prod, and it's selecting Ample ID. So you can start to make sense of that even if you're not an expert with SQL, structured query language, but it's not too hard to start figuring it out. So the RADW1, that's recruiting and admissions, and then after the next period is the name of the folder, and after the next period is the name of the object. So you can start to look at how these things are created with the maintain reports, because those are reports that have been vetted. We know they're good. So I think I'm just gonna go back and stop sharing my screen and see what else y'all have to say. Is there a way to download your brain with an index? Michelle, that would be a very scary thing. Yeah, you don't care, believe me. All right. So I really hope you check out the Business Objects resources in my link, and we're still in the process of updating the beginning Business Objects course, and to be honest, we are updating the data courses in the data warehouse. But the data hasn't changed. Like, the tool changed with the upgrade, but the data hasn't changed, and the maintained reports haven't changed. So I would very much recommend that you go in and just check out some of those reports, because they talk about how to make minor modifications. And pretty much all the maintained reports, are the great majority of them, involve multiple queries. You will find today's recording on our IT4U playlist after we've had time to upload it and provide some closed captioning. And here are the IT4U, if you're not on my little email list in M-Community. And I think that's about it. Let's go on to the polls, and we'll stop recording right now.